All right. Good morning, Doug. We have questions today from members of the File. That's our private community for subscribers to Crisis Investing. If you want to know more, go to crisisinvesting.com. First, before we get to those questions, Doug, I think it's worth talking. We have some time to reflect on the debate, what's happened since then, and how, we had our initial impressions on how we thought it went, but I've kind of been able to see kind of the way it's unfolded over time. Have you updated your thinking around it at all?
Well, it's funny. I, as I pointed out, I subscribe to the fag hag rag in Washington that Jeff Bezos owns, and also uh, the older hag in New York. I don't know who owns the Times at this point. And the New York Times did a poll of 14 of their best known columnists, and very predictably, 13 of the 14 said that Kamala won by a mile, and the oddball said that he wasn't sure, but it was all very depressing, which I guess it was actually. So he was the most accurate of them. And of course, the WAPO is like a paid newsletter of the Democratic Party. Actually, it's further left than that. Well, anyway, so you're like everybody else, you're subject to these influences where other people say, well, I think, and, I feel, and blah, blah, blah. So have I changed my opinion? Um, no, I haven't. And, I said that, I think when we talked the last time, I said, was there a lot of bias on the part of the interviewers? Well, I wasn't really paying much attention to that. And maybe it's just because of the way I'm wired. Most of the time when I've been interviewed by public entities, as opposed to friendly blogs in the past, I'm so used to hostile questions that I think that that's just the way questions are supposed to be. So, I mean, if I'd been in Trump's position, I don't know if I would have said anything at all about it. I mean, wait a minute. Uh, well, they were moderators, not interviewers, so maybe it's a little bit different. But I don't want to go off on a tangent. But the one thing that I noticed that nobody, or that I haven't noticed, nobody has said anything about the very best question that the moderator, one of them, asked. Is the guy asked, I think it was a guy, said, Mr. Trump, you've said that there are at least 10,000, maybe, no, 10 million, maybe 20 million, maybe more illegal migrants in the US, and you are going to evict them. Exactly how are you going to do that? Now, that's a very legitimate question. You can call it a hostile question or not. I don't know. I don't think it was. It was a question. And Trump didn't have the answer. He hadn't thought it out. And of course, the problem is, I don't know how you do get rid of them unless you send out the police to knock on doors and round up everybody whose papers aren't in order. What I'm trying to say is that now that the migrants are a problem, and maybe you can cut them off, further immigration, but these people that are here, it's going to be really tough to get rid of them as a practical matter. But nobody's talked about that. And that was the
Yeah.
best question that they asked Trump, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd love, the debates are so far from focusing on policy matters, like exactly how people are going to do stuff, exactly what their plans are. It's
Yeah.
all personality and insults and stuff like that. I mean, that's the way things have degraded. And that's what people like. And if I think and have come to expect, really, that's.
Yeah. There were no intelligent actual answers. I mean, both Trump and uh, Kamala just skated on all of these things, and nobody pinned them down. Well, anyway, the policies answers are completely unimportant because the average guy doesn't keep up with policy and doesn't have any particular philosophical beliefs to allow him to interpret policy. So it was basically just deciding whether he liked the person, whether he trusts the person, general impression. And based on that, who gave the best impression? Just as a person that you trust or like. I don't know what the average guy feels of. I don't know who the average guy is anymore, quite
That's a
frankly.
good question. It's a good question. Well, I'll tell you, so there have been some things that I feel like are fallout from it that maybe are, well, seem a little unanticipated, at least for me, and I think might have a big impact on things down the road. And one is that while, like you said, the questions to Trump didn't seem particularly biased to you, because to me, they're always that way. So they just seem normal. In every Republican versus Democrat, it seems like whoever the moderator is, the questions are always more critical, I guess, of the conservative candidate versus the liberal candidate. It seems like it's always that way. But it's been reported widely that they never fact checked Kamala. They did it to Trump several times, even when they were totally wrong about it. When Kamala said things that were, totally untrue, they never mentioned it. And then they only pressed for follow-ups with Trump. So I saw this discussed even on CNN, not quite to the degree that others have, like the conservative news networks, but even they have mentioned it. And there's a guy who uploaded the transcript of the debate to ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT if they thought it showed bias. And I'll link to the recording, and I don't want to show the whole thing, but basically ChatGPT even said, yeah, clearly there's a lot of bias in this. There's not follow-up questions for Harris. There's critical questions that come from or toward Trump. So even ChatGPT didn't notice. So I think that's out there now, and that's not great for Harris. I also think even worse, I guess this is true. I mean, we'll know by tomorrow. But a former Clinton advisor, this guy named Mark Penn, says he's releasing an affidavit from an ABC whistleblower that accuses them of rigging the debate in one way by releasing the questions to Kamala in advance. Now, we've heard allegations of this in the past with, like, Hillary. I think there were rumors that she got the questions in advance. But if this came out, that this was clear, that this actually did happen, then I feel like this has a lot of blowback for her that's very negative. I mean, it is election interference, is it not?
Yes, I would say that it is. And I think that she did get the questions in advance. And the reason that I feel that that's the case is that she was very smooth, very practiced, even with her facial expressions and the way she moved her hands. When she was asked a direct question, she had rehearsed what they thought would be a slick answer. Yeah. So I think it happened. And if I was a prosecutor of some type, I would have to pursue that, because this is kind of election interference, or whether it is or not, you can make a scandalous case about that, which is all you really have to do today. I mean, as the Democrats did with Trump. But, you've got to expect almost all interviewers to be biased one way or another, but most of them, almost all of them, towards the Democratic side. Because when we went over those 20 questions that Michael Moore asked, how does the American public feel about 20 major subjects of discussion or issues that people are interested in? The answers of the American public were overwhelmingly Democrat or collectivist, or so yeah, the average American does have the wrong, from our point of view, philosophical and political leaning. And that is amplified in the media, which is totally captured by the leftists. Because if you're a conservative, forget about a libertarian, in the newsroom of any major publication, you're going to be ostracized. I mean, you're going to be like a chicken with a feather out of place in a coop. You'll be pecked to death by your so-called colleagues. So it's pretty hopeless, actually, getting a fair shake in a debate or anything else. And anyway, Trump doesn't have a philosophical core anyway, as I've said many times. He's just got a gut feel that we kind of
Yep.
like. That's all.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest blowback things from the debate, actually, speaking of the idea that the Americans are making the decisions based upon the feel of things, how the candidate is perceived. There's been a lot of memes after the debate created around this thing that's happening with the Haitians in Springfield, Ohio. And here, let me share this with you real quick. This is just an example of the meme.
They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, eat the cat, eat the cat. They're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats, eat the cat, eat the cat. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs, eat the cat, eat the cat, eat the cat. They're eating the dogs,
So this, in various versions, is in a lot of places, all over TikTok, certainly lots on Twitter. And it's, this thing, it's weird how something like this has seemingly a greater impact on the minds of people than any policy item or anything else that's out there.
It's true. It's true. And because people love their pets, don't they?
They do. And there's something very, there's in the idea that if you have migrants and you can imagine them hunting your pets and butchering them and eating them, it conjures all kinds of other collapse society type impressions in your head. And it's no longer the nice Hispanic family down the road that is hardworking and good. Like you see those as totally separate things, and it's scary for people.
Yeah, there's two places in the world that I've been where I really noticed something about wildlife or animals. And that was Haiti, where I've been to numerous times, and China too. Is there's nothing that moves in those two countries other than humans. It's like they've all been hunted and eaten. And it's true in China, and it's definitely true in Haiti, because that whole country is on the ragged edge of starvation. And if it's edible, it's hunted and eaten. So, yeah, I believe this about the Haitians. They've got this cultural thing. Eating cats, uh, it, carnivores generally have dark and rather a little bit on the mushy side, actually, meat. And I say that I've never eaten cat, but I have eaten dog in a Chinese restaurant. And apart from the fact I'm a dog lover, uh, I didn't think it was very tasty, just as you wouldn't mistake it for chicken, let me put it that way, which almost everything else would be. And the other thing is that when police raid somebody's house, I mean, it seems, or there are a lot of instances where they just automatically shoot the dog, even if it's just a little rat that's barking. And that's bad because the dog is maybe a little bit of a nuisance, but it's not dangerous. And it just shows a bad attitude, a vicious attitude on the part of the cop that does that. If he shot a person, well, maybe the person was going for a knife or a gun, or that's what they'd say anyway. But there's no excuse for shooting a person's pet.
And
So,
and people have a viscerally negative response to that. I think
yeah,
people would be more against this no-knock raids and all that based upon the killing of a pet than they would a killing of an innocent person.
I completely agree, and I feel that way myself. It gives you an insight into the people that would, well, first of all, conduct a no-knock raid to start with. That's completely improper. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that come out of this is that Trump was immediately fact checked that this wasn't true. you know, that there's no evidence of this. And so a lot of people have gone to Springfield, Ohio, and are interviewing residents, and they're interviewing Haitians. And there's a lot of crazy stuff that's come out of that. Let me just share this one clip from one person who's there right now, or was there recently. At least this is his view about what's actually happening there.
My neighbor's dog, my neighbor's neighbor went over to his house crying because the Haitians had just moved in, stole 2 of his cats and skinned him and ate them and threw his skins back over the fence. They got police reports on this shit. They steal the ducks out of Snyder Park all the time. There's no ducks. There's geese, but there's no ducks. They told all the ducks, and that's a proven fact. The police has already sat there, walked in the guy's house, had the swans and all the ducks hanging up in their kitchen. They didn't do nothing but give him a $150 fine.
Harold,
They
this
let
is
them get by with murder around here. They wreck everybody's cars. My neighbor's dog, my neighbor.
So there are there's lots of stuff like that that's come out of Springfield. And then there's also one of the biggest things that's amazing is that somehow these people, these Haitians, can get driver's licenses. And they go in and they are causing accidents every single day because they can't drive. They don't know how to drive.
No, the average person, no, forget about cars in Haiti and the average person. That's out of the question. This is all completely crazy. Apart from the fact that the average Haitian doesn't speak English. In fact, the average Haitian barely speaks French. They all speak Creole, which is a kind of a French-sounding patois, which if you're a French speaker, you can't even understand it. So how can you communicate with these people properly? A few of them, yeah, but most of them, no.
But how do they get driver's licenses? And so we have a guy he goes to the DMV. I don't have this video, but he goes to the DMV and he's asking people about, people going in and out, including employees from the DMV, and they refuse to answer any questions about it. It's like, well, do they have to, are they getting their license transferred? And of course they don't have a license from Haiti, so that's not what it is. And he asked questions about, do they have to do a driving test? And she goes, I am not allowed to answer questions about it. I'm not allowed to answer questions. So they're issuing these licenses without testing and giving, and somehow they get cars that don't have insurance. And people down there who've gone to visit and they have on video these drivers driving crazy with no license plates on the car, and there's a Facebook group where they share all the accidents from Haitians in town. I mean, it's actually insane.
There's something really fishy going on here. I mean, it really is crazy what's going on here.
It is. And this is just like, we got zoomed in on one microcosm. So we've only gotten these little views. We got, the Aurora and the Venezuelan, gangs. And then we get a little zoom in on that. And then we get this little zoom in about what's happening in Springfield, Ohio. And I think this kind of thing is happening everywhere. Imagine what it's like in New York.
It does. And going back to what Yuri Bezimov said years ago, I'm not sure if this is under the category of demoralization, because it certainly is, or destabilization, which it certainly is. It's both. So I think we're clearly heading towards a genuine crisis, because these people, I mean, sure, their kids and their grandkids will kind of meld into society, but they're not going to meld into society. They're going to stick with their fellow countrymen, and it ain't going to be good for the locals who are supporting them, basically.
Right. And in this town in Springfield, which basically it's an impoverished town. Most of the people that I've heard interviewed are on disability or welfare, the locals that are being interviewed, and they're pissed because they can't get access to stuff, but these Haitians are, and their rents are being driven up. Landlords like kick out the locals, and then they bring in like 40 Haitians.
That's right. Oh, God. And where are the Haitians getting the money? I guess there's some kind of a chicken plucking plant around there where they work at.
Something like that. Apparently there's a local company that hires, so a local company that has businesses like that, they hire this temp service, and this temp service somehow makes for legal employment of Haitians at a much lower wage than Americans would do it at, like at $9 an hour instead of, 20 or whatever. But they don't have to provide them any benefits because these Haitians they're getting housing subsidized and food subsidized, and all their medical care taken care of. So, basically the government is subsidizing these jobs.
And is there a prison there that uh, has been closed down where they're putting the Haitians where they can live? Or is that a different town?
Oh, I haven't heard about that.
Yes, apparently there's a prison someplace which is devoid of prisoners, which is pretty hard to believe in today's America. And they're putting migrants in the prison.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look this up. I'm not sure. I don't see anything quickly when I looked it up, but yeah,
Well,
it's
where
it's
did
a
I see
mess.
that? It was a video. Yeah, all this crazy stuff. Yeah, it's destabilizing, and it's demoralizing for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, you can see the resentment building among the locals there. And that's where you're going to get these flashpoints. I mean, they're like putting groups together that are going that with built-in resentment because some are getting benefits that are better than other benefits. Some have to follow rules, others don't have to follow rules. It's like they're creating, as I guess Michael Yan would say, the conditions for conflict. Whether they're triggering it or not, that'll happen on its own, but they're creating conditions where it's going to happen at some point.
I don't see any way around it, quite frankly. Anyway, nothing we can do about it. I'm very happy to be in a rural, unaffected place in Virginia, but it'll be affected in the future. God forbid if or Kamala, I should say more accurately, is installed. I mean, who can tell what she's going to do?
Well, she picked up some big endorsements this week. I don't know if you heard about this one. Makes a big difference, I guess.
Former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congresswoman Liz Cheney are supporting me as well.
So that's apparently popular with the Democratic Party somehow.
Oh, I mean, Dick Cheney actually is, he's got to be described as an evil person, and his daughter is just as bad or worse. Why people would cheer for them, it's really like cheering for Hitler or Stalin.
Yeah, it's shocking to me. And he was, to the Democrats at one point, Darth Vader. I mean, he really was a bad guy. Like how things have gotten so inverted that his endorsement actually carries weight with him now is crazy.
And how they could pick a nothing nobody like Kamala, who has slept her way to the top, and now has the appearance of being popular among these people.
Yeah.
Well, if the average American was 75% or something in that order in favor of the 20 questions that Michael Moore put forward, as we pointed out, anything's possible at this point.
It's true, but it's still surprising to me. I mean, you would
Yes.
Cheney was clouded with so much bad stuff. You'd think that somebody would have some shame, about talking about touting it. Maybe Kamala is not really, she couldn't figure it out. Maybe she's like doesn't know or is too dumb or whatever, or is totally shameless. But all the pundits on TV talking about it.
I think that she basically approves of Cheney and what she can parse of his views. And one of the finest moments of my adult life was when I met Cheney. And I've told this incident in the past, and I don't know if I should bother telling it again.
Yeah, you should. I think it's worth it.
Yeah, because it was actually foolish on my part. Because anyway, at the New Orleans conference years ago, when he was running for president, whatever year that was, he was having a fundraiser at New Orleans with some rich potential donors. And a friend of mine, David Galland, wanted to, who despises Cheney as I do, he was sure correctly that if he threw me into the mix, it would be like throwing a mink into a hen house. So anyway, Dick is shaking hands with everybody and how are you, blah, blah, blah. So he comes up to me and says, hi, how are you? Sticks his hand out. And I said, Dick, I'm not going to shake hands with you. I despise you and everything you stand for. And then Dick said, and I thought, that's a solid punch to the gut in public, small, rich group. I thought it would shatter him, but it didn't. And he comes back and he asks me, well, why do you say that? Well, that was the wrong thing for him to say also, because that gave me an opening to give about a 60-second mini lecture about why I thought he was such a scumbag. And then after that, he did go on slow burn, and it ruined his whole day. But that's not the end of the story. It's kind of foolish on my part because somebody who is highly placed like that, especially with these nasty intelligence agencies, might decide to, do something to you to teach you a lesson. So anyway, 2 weeks later on, I'm in San Francisco, and Cheney is there also raising money for his campaign. And Mark Skousen, who loves to do this type of thing, he meets Cheney by accident in the business center of the Hyatt, where we were in San Francisco, where the conference was. And idiotically, this is typical of what the type of thing Mark, he has no social graces, quite frankly, common sense in this way. He says to Cheney in the business center, says, Mr. Cheney, I understand that in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, you met a friend of mine, Doug Casey, and he's using that as an introduction. I mean, that's crazy. And Cheney wouldn't talk to him or shake his hand or anything because appropriately he thought that Skousen was insulting him. Well, that wasn't Skousen's intention. He just thought it was a good introduction, which was idiotic. So the thing that I took away from that is that Cheney actually remembered my name. I thought he would have just written me off as just a heckler, but he must have done some research. Otherwise, when Skousen said that, he wouldn't have reacted the way he did. But I'm still alive, and the IRS hasn't audited me, and there are no, suburban
black bagged
windows hanging out at my so I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, and maybe back then, but it seems now, if something like this happened now, the posture of the Justice Department in particular has gotten way more aggressive. And we saw this obviously with the January 6th stuff, but here's this clip from A.G. Garland just yesterday. I believe this is what happened. Maybe it was the day before, but here's his comments.
Officials across the country. Over the past 3.5 years, there has been an escalation of attacks on the Justice Department's career lawyers, agents, and other personnel that go far beyond scrutiny, criticism, and legitimate and necessary oversight of our work. These attacks have come in the form of conspiracy theories, dangerous falsehoods, efforts to bully and intimidate career public servants by repeatedly and publicly singling them out, and threats of actual violence. Through your work, you have made clear that the Justice Department will not be intimidated by these attacks. But it is dangerous and outrageous that you have to endure them. It is dangerous to target and intimidate individual employees of this department solely for doing their jobs. And it is outrageous that you have to face these unfounded attacks because you are doing what is right and upholding the rule of law.
So Dick Cheney was just doing his job, and so your criticisms of him today would be outrageous and unacceptable by Garland standards.
Pretty much like those hundreds of people that have been imprisoned almost immediately after they did something that was considered unacceptable by the ruling clique. And it's the same thing here. And it's the same thing that happened with those January 6th people. This is really dangerous. These are the same personality types that have taken over lots of countries in the past, and they've come out from under their rocks here in the US. It's really, really dangerous at this point.
Yeah, and I should clarify, he's talking to people in the Justice Department. So he's talking to Justice Department staff. And of course, I love how they're presented as victims.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's creating an us against them atmosphere that make these people feel more paranoid than they probably didn't in the past. I mean, he's like inciting violence. Is what he's actually doing. This we're heading towards a civil war.
Yeah. You know, as you say that, it reminds me of like there was some point in the US where law enforcement training got switched to more like military training. Not only did they have all the extra equipment, but it became much more of a rather than peace officer, it was law enforcement. It was like just come home safe, became the mantra among cops. And they started to look at every time they pulled someone over that it was a life-threatening situation for them, and they had to be really careful. And that sort of attitude does not lead to better outcomes for anyone involved.
Yes, I mean, just in my own life, I mean, it used to be that when a cop stopped you, you could get out of your car and meet the cop on neutral ground between the two cars. You don't dare do that now. In fact, you better keep your hands on the steering wheel, and the cop won't even be at a 90-degree angle to you. He'll be somewhat to your left, which might make it harder for you to. They've been trained to do this, and this kind of paranoia is self-reinforcing. So that really just like the worst kind of people get into politics that like to control other people, I'm afraid the worst kind of people are tending to join the police force now because they can see what's going on. And believe it or not, when I had my first job in Washington, D.C., I was actually thinking about joining the D.C. police force because I thought it'd be an interesting experience. But I wouldn't even countenance that now because things have changed so much.
Yeah. My dad was a cop, and through his career, there was a change. There was a big change. Like he was a peace officer for sure. And he's like remember him saying 20 years ago, he's like, these young guys coming in here now, they're different. Like they don't, they see it us and them.
Yeah, us and them. Exactly. It's not good.
Yeah, it's not. Well, on the good news, gold had a huge breakout. It seems all new all-time highs. And gold stocks seem to be starting to move as well. Any comments or thoughts on gold and gold stocks?
Yeah, I think that finally these gold stocks are, in relative terms, the cheapest that they've ever been that I've seen them at. Nobody likes them. Institutions can't own them. The public doesn't, blah, blah, blah. And in fact, the gold stocks have gone nowhere for so long now that I try to monitor my own psychology. You have to monitor your own psychology, both at manic highs of bull markets and panic lows of bear markets. And right now, the way I feel, this isn't the way I think, it's the way I feel, is I want to blow out all this garbage because most mining stocks are garbage anyway. Let's admit it. It's a bad business, as I pointed out many times before. But I actually feel that way now. So when I feel that way, yeah, we're approaching the bottom, and I think you're right, it's turning around. So I continue to say, letting my mind as opposed to my emotions speak, yeah, you got to buy these things. Although I continue to say the only intelligent way to buy them is in financings where you get a warrant so you can be a disloyal shareholder in case I'm wrong and it goes down further. You blow the stock out, keep the warrant in case things get lucky.
Okay. Well, let's get to some of these questions from just a few of them for you today from members of the file. First one is, if Western societies collapse, who will police maritime law around the world? As I see it, the military of the Western world is only for policing the maritime law and not for people's freedom.
Well, that's just the Navy and the Coast Guard that are supposed to tamp down piracy to start with. You don't need the Army or the Marines for that. But you don't even need the Navy for those things, because all these big ships they certainly could, have their own private security. They should be armed so that they can I mean, look, it's self-defense. You don't have to hire the government to defend you wherever they might be. I mean, all of these large transport ships, oil or cargo or whatever the hell it is, the crew should be trained to defend the damn ship. So you don't need the Navy, because the Navy's probably not even going to be there when you need them. When, pirates come up in a small boat and attack you. So I understand the question, but it comes at the problem from the wrong angle. You don't need the government to defend yourself against piracy. And the problem is that it's illegal to have arms on most of these boats. You're not supposed to have any weapons to defend yourself. So once again, the government is the enemy, and you expect the government to defend you. So the question is a little bit wrong-headed, although I understand it.
Right. Just like there's private insurance policies, right? We could have, people pay, every ship pays for insurance. So they could obviously have a little budget item for defense.
Yeah, of course. And the kind of crew that you hire would be preferable if they could show that they were trained in the use of weapons, or you train them before you hire them as crews. So that's the best solution to the problem, actually.
Yeah. All right. Doug, what have you changed your mind about in the last 4 to 5 years?
It's funny that Kamala said that she hasn't changed her basic values, but she's changed whatever she was talking about. She's reversed herself on all kinds of practical applications of her values, which are immutable.
Exactly.
And I actually, to be sure of this, I'd have to go through conversations that we've had and that I've had on internationalman.com, where I write these, and my newsletter, which has been around since 1979. I can't think of anything that I've really changed. Now, on the one hand, I say, well, that's dangerous, because you don't want to have your opinions concrete bound and written in stone. But should your philosophy of life change at all if you believe you've worked it out? Well, who was this? Was it Churchill, who I'm not a fan of, incidentally, said, or it was somebody, maybe it was Keynes, who I'm definitely not a fan of, said, well, when the facts change, so does my opinion. Okay, but an opinion is different from a life philosophy, which you should have worked out, because we're talking about good and evil here. So yeah. I guess that's the answer to the question. The answer is basically no.
One thing I think that you've changed your thinking on a bit, because with new information, is I remember, you didn't buy into even the notion of conspiracy, really, because you'd say that, use the example of, you get 4 friends together and they can't agree on where to go for dinner. How can how can there be any larger conspiracy? But it seems that you've changed your mind about that a little bit. Maybe, am I right about that or no?
Yeah, you are right. Frankly, maybe it's if only because I've become even more cynical about the average person. So yeah, that's a good point, Matt. I think you are right. I'm more prone to believe that you know, evil does exist in the world, and people of that mind, birds of a feather, do flock together, and they would form conspiracies because their interests are aligned, whatever evil intents they have. Yeah, I'm afraid that I probably have become more conspiracy minded. You're quite correct.
Well, and also, I mean, there's the basic idea that I remember when I finally found a good example that I could share with you in the podcast, which was maybe 6 months ago, when the idea that something wouldn't happen in secret, people agreeing, and I said, well, what about the Manhattan Project? You know, I mean, where there were 200,000 people that were working quietly on that project and no one knew. So there are, under certain conditions, clearly secrecy can be maintained. So
Yeah, of course, the penalty for letting the cat out of the bag on that would have been draconian. If anybody, you'd be executed. And
yeah.
other things that the military or the government does, you don't dare say anything if you want to stay alive, perhaps. But yeah, it's true.
Okay. Let's see. The question is, both of us thought that Kamala won the debate. So the question is, do you even remember a single thing that she said in the debate? I can't.
No, but she was well prepared with her answers when a direct question was asked to her, but it was slick. They were the kind of answers that you can't be pinned down on. They're kind of like meaningless generalities to skate over. No direct answers about here's exactly what I would do to solve that problem. So no, I actually don't. Although I do remember, you know, Trump, he's a lot more fun to watch. I mean, she was just a rehearsed plastic doll. Well, once again, how's the average person react to that? Thinking that she's smarter than they said she was. Uh, you know, I don't know. It doesn't mean anything though, because I'm convinced that as long as the American public feels that it's going to be a close race, that's what all the media is saying. It's going to be close, neck and neck. So that if you do all the things that you can do to steal the election, and there are plenty, and the Democrats are going to do them all, these Jacobins will, because they want to stay in office. I still believe that even though Trump will get the popular vote, that'll be disguised. And Kamala, Spanish for burn her, will win.
All right. What surprises will Joe Biden unleash before leaving office?
I've been thinking about that, and it seems to me the way they'll play their cards is that he resigns and lets her be president for the last couple of months. I think that would be a good gambit on their part. Then she'd be the seated president, and she can do a few things that'll separate her from Biden. That'll, a couple of neat executive orders that are popularly acceptable or give her good press. So if I was running the Democratic Party, I would tell Biden he's actually got to resign to spend more time with his family, I think, or pursue other interests. Those are the two reasons you often give it. And that Kamala will be the president, and she can do some neat things that will be pre-programmed to be popular among the people that, yeah. So that's what I think that could happen. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that seems like a no-brainer, for them to do. I can't imagine a reason why they wouldn't do that. If they want her to be president, it makes sense that they would put her in that role so people can see her in that role, and maybe have some really justifiable airstrikes for her to order. Americans always love that.
They do. They do. That's right. Yeah. Got to defend against foreign and domestic enemies. And it's not hard to find domestic enemies, even if you have to totally fabricate a foreign enemy. We got plenty of, I mean, there's all kinds of things they can do. And I'm sure their evil little minds are working overtime to make sure that she's installed. And I think they'll succeed because they control the apparatus of the state now. That's so important, as well, as Maduro has shown us recently in Venezuela.
Yeah. Will you still go to the US if Kamala's installed?
Well, after Hitler was installed, it didn't become immediately dangerous to go to Germany. When Stalin was installed, it wasn't immediately dangerous to go to the Soviet Union. So I don't think these things, when all kinds of nasty people are installed, the problem that I have is, as a known and frankly self-declared enemy of the state, I think, and this is not trying to say I'm a bigger deal than the average person, but if I were these guys, I would try to make examples of people that, can be shown to be really opposed. So in my position, because we have this podcast and I have a blog and I have books.
You have decades of saying these things.
Yeah, exactly. So I think I'm in a lot more danger than the average guy is, although the average guy is going to be in danger too. So the answer to the question is, I'll be really cautious about coming back to the US, certainly after she's entrenched herself. God, I hope I'm wrong about this. I mean, it's not like I'm hoping Trump wins, because he's going to have his own bunch of crazy things that he's going to do, but he's going to be better than Kamala.
Yeah, and I mean, the most frightening stuff to me is definitely the actions of the Justice Department. It's that internal security, like that's the stuff that gets the population. That's where they get them. So that's what worries me the most, and that wouldn't be the issue with Trump, as I see it.
No, it wouldn't. And the FBI, the corruption that has appeared in the FBI in recent years will be further entrenched, no question about it. I mean, the remaining decent and honest agents will be purged just by peer pressure, and it'll be the same with all of these agencies. So it's really dangerous if she wins, and I think she's going to win. And I hope I'm wrong. Sincerely.
Yeah. Let's see. What are your thoughts on holding physical gold and silver in an RRSP? I guess it's like an IRA in Canada, as opposed to having it invested in the stock market or bonds, etc. I've been doing well riding the S&P 500, but I'm starting to think it's about to crash and that physical metals are the answer.
Well, I think you're right. But the thing with an RRSP or other tax-free type accounts is that the ideal thing to have in them is something that yields some current income, which is sheltered also. The best place to hold the metals is real metals in your personal possession. And in your RSP or whatever it is, I presume you just have to own paper metals. So I guess that could be okay, but I think if you can find them, better things, types of things other than metals to put in there, because I don't think you can get your hands on the metals. They
Well, I
have
know
metals in that, don't they? Or
I know in the US for an IRA, there are certain services that do allow you to take physical metals.
yeah,
A self-directed IRA, like that kind of approach. Maybe that's possible in Canada. I don't know.
yeah. Well, yeah. Because isn't RRSP, that is a Canadian thing
Yeah.
there. So I don't know. It would be better if you could find something with I hate to recommend anybody buy a gold stock for their retirement, because they're all burning matches. They're trading sardines. They're not eating sardines. And if you buy something, you might hold it too long. I mean, they're not growth stocks. Although right now, I got to say, I really believe the gold stocks are going to go up a multiple from
Yeah,
here.
and if you're looking at the big companies, it's not the trading sardine that you'd have with these, the micro caps, right? I mean,
Oh, you can buy stuff like Newmont and Rio Tinto and Barrick and so forth. I think that would be a better alternative because all of them, at least, you got to get a little bit of, you're going to get more leverage than with the metals, and you do get a current yield. In most cases, we're talking about 3% for these big mining companies. That's a fair number. So I think that's a better idea.
Hmm.
But I don't give investment advice. I'll just give you an opinion and tell you what I would do.
exactly. Okay. Last question here is the guy says he's an electrician with 10,000 pounds extra to invest. Should I get into gold mining stocks after watching your help on the 9Ps? He's a file member, so he watched the video you did on the 9Ps. So should he invest in gold mining stocks or just carry on buying gold sovereigns? What's a good place to, as a working class guy over 50 years old?
Can't go wrong buying gold coins. And he mentioned sovereigns, which of course are a British coin also. They're actually the most commonly traded and most internationally acceptable of gold coins are sovereigns, which are 0.235 or something like that ounces of gold per sovereign. So they're a very convenient size. They're widely accepted and recognized. So yeah, have some of those in your personal possession. But in a pension plan, I think it's like the previous question, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, he wasn't asking about pension. He was asking he's got some extra cash. Should he continue to buy sovereigns or should he step into mining stocks?
Look, my opinion is that these mining stocks are at the bottom, and I don't like the way to buy them is in private placements with the warrant. Okay, so you can discard the basic stock if things aren't going the right way and keep the warrant in case you get lucky. That's the thing to remember. But not everybody can buy a private placement because they're supposed to be for qualified investors, which rule out a lot of people, which is too bad. So
well, the good thing about the sovereigns, if I remember this right, is that there's no capital gains on them in the UK because they're the coin of the realm or something like that. So I mean that's a big advantage of holding onto those versus, I mean, you have to imagine even if you get big gains in a gold stock, if you have to pay capital gains on it versus where the sovereigns where you wouldn't, that's positive.
yeah, it is. Well, another thing, living in the UK, which seems to be certainly under the current regime there of Keir Starmer, is moving more rapidly towards the world of V for Vendetta and turning into a police state than even the US or Canada. But maybe not Australia. Maybe Australia is really, it's all bad. Since you've got a valuable skill as an electrician, perhaps you should consider going someplace else and getting out of the UK.
That's a good suggestion.
I mean, because I've said this many times before, and I think I'm quite correct. Your financial risks are great, but your political risks dwarf the financial risks. And of course, the political risks are causing most of the financial risks too.
Right. Just a bad Facebook post can get you in trouble where he's at.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know where.
I'm sorry, I was going to jump to something
Oh,
else.
I was going to say, but where can you go? Can't go to Australia. Forget about that. Canada, the US. Where do you go? Because you probably, like most Americans, most Englishmen don't have a second language, which can be acquired. It's not that hard. But when you're 50, it's harder. No question about that. So where could he go that would be a good move? Where could he go that would be a good move?
You really want to go for a place where, his skills would be in demand because he's got that trade that's valuable. So I think you got to start with that as a reference point. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So where would they be in demand, quite frankly? I don't know. That's worth researching. It's so hard to say. Where would an electrician's well, I guess you could go to English-speaking Africa and but would the money be any good, even though you'd have a lot of demand? There's demand from people that don't have a lot of money to pay, generally. Unless you're working with the upper classes, then you can earn quite a bit, because they'll pay anything to make sure things work right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he ought to research this somehow. I'd like to think about it. It's where is the ideal place to go these days, where people with actual important physical skills are needed. They're needed everywhere, but especially where people can afford to pay for them.
Yeah, I think if you're entrepreneurial, there's a lot of places you could probably go and make something happen. Because, even in here in Uruguay, there's definitely skilled people in the skilled trades, but there's different standards here than there are in the US and I'm sure in the UK. And, the expectations of the expats who come here are different than what the locals have. And there's a huge opportunity to fill that gap, even here, where it's not like a huge booming economy.
Yeah, there is like an old friend of mine in Aspen was a very successful real estate broker and construction contractor. And he made a lot of money and he lost it all because he over-leveraged himself. So he moved to Argentina and moved to Cafayate. And from having nothing to start with and not even speaking Spanish, now he's got a successful business down there. He's gotten married. He's doing really well and he's happy. Well, I'm glad he got out of Aspen. I'm glad I got out of Aspen. But Kevin was a guy who was 50 years old when he did that. And it's worked out really well from him. Not speaking Spanish and having nothing to start with. So it can be done. Argentina is not a bad place with Milei in office too. It's going to get better there, much better.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. One thing I was just going to say, mention Australia. I saw today this in Twitter that there's a new misinformation bill that's been presented into the Australian House or Parliament, whatever you'd call it. And one of the things in there, it talks about, all the things you can't say. Like you can't question the efficacy of preventative health measures, for instance. You can't question gender identity. But also there's this. It says there's a section on imminent harm to the Australian economy, including harm to public confidence in the banking system or financial markets.
Good grief. Now, has that been, Dan Denning mentioned that to me. He used to live in Australia. He does a newsletter with Bill Bonner and Tom Dyson. So we were talking yesterday. Has that been proposed or is it actually a law?
This is I believe this is just a proposal, or is it law? That's a good question. It's the Communications Legislation Amendment, Combating Misinformation and Disinformation Bill 2024.
So it's still a proposal.
Yeah.
Well, we'll find out how stupid and evil the Australian legislature is pretty soon, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, imagine being criminal to ask a bank or a company because there's systemically important firms.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. Right here on my desk. I don't know where I was going through some old papers. Listen to this. In a country where the sole employer is the state, well, that's not the case with Australia. Opposition means death by slow starvation. The old principle, who does not work shall not eat, has been replaced by a new one. Who does not obey shall not eat. And that was quoted by Hayek in his Road to Serfdom, and it was said by Leon Trotsky. So he who does not obey. It's not he who does not work shall not eat, which is fair enough. It's he who does not obey shall not eat. So that
Feels like we're on that road.
sad to say.
Yeah. Terrifying. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll leave it here for today, Doug, and we'll be back next week. And then I guess later next week, you're heading to Asia.
I'm off to the mysterious Orient, starting with Kuala Lumpur, and then I will go to Thailand, which is absolutely one of my favorite countries in the world. And then, with a little bit of luck, to Sri Lanka, which I want to see what it's like after the long, nasty civil war that they had, and then their more recent economic collapse. See what it's like there. It's kind of India light. So
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
before I get
All right.
back to Argentina and Uruguay in very late October. So anyway.
Okay. All right. Well, definitely looking forward to hear what you learn on the way. And I think you'll be meeting up for a podcast with Michael Yan when you're in Thailand as well. So that'll be cool.
Yeah, that's going to be great. I'm looking forward to spending some time with them in person in Thailand.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, thanks, Doug. I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Matt. See you then.